This is Van Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air on our Twitch, YouTube, and um, Facebook channels. For the first time, we have Joe Rubin. Welcome to the
Hey,
Fan Electric Ghost podcast.
thank you so much for having me.
So, thank you. It's always great to talk to people. We've been out here since 2016. This is episode 897 of the Fan Electric Ghost podcast. So, it's always been fun to do that. The topic here we're going to focus on is growing a community around a podcast. And we also have to mention we are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. So if you check out Ghost, you can get 1 month free premium subscription. And we will be on Newsly later tonight. So thank you again for being on the podcast.
Yeah, so 897, you must be probably one of the longest running podcasts in the world at this point with that many episodes. That's fantastic.
Yeah, we started in 2016. Just to give a brief thing, I'm a musician. I was on SoundCloud. This guy named Rock Tunes out of New York approached me, and we were on an app called Spearman.
Right.
And he said, "Hey, I can interview you about your music because you got like 400 songs on SoundCloud." And I said, "Okay." So we had a first interview, and then suddenly we liked each other so much we did a podcast talking about music for like 6 months on Spearman.
That's
And
awesome.
then he got too busy, and then I said, "Well, why don't I go and use like Anchor to do a podcast interviewing emerging and independent artists in the kind of
Right.
underground?" And I've done over 300 interviews with emerging and independent artists all over the world since then. And then I expanded to podcasters, life coaches, shamans, anybody that I thought was interesting. So it's gone very expansive, and we still have music as a core, but we've expanded beyond what people said. "Oh, you shouldn't do that. You should just be narrow." And I'm like, no, it works for me.
Nice. I am also a shaman, by the way. No, I'm just joking. I am not a shaman. I'm definitely more on the podcast host side, entrepreneur side, and music side as well. So happy to chat about all those things.
That's cool. So I think well you have one question you like to answer, which is should you treat your podcast like a business? And I think I've been starting to do that. Like when I first started, I didn't, and then I kind of changed my mind about 2 years ago, and became monetized, have sponsors, and do other things, and then I just kind of treat it with the respect of actually showing up. I
Right.
actually am very consistent. I do a lot of episodes. And so I think like once you start treating it with like a side gig or your main gig,
Mhm.
or actually like a gig, like a musician, you treat your show as that's a job, that's
Yeah.
something you're gonna do. That's the way I treat it, but I'm not sure. Like maybe some people don't.
Not everybody does. It depends on what you're using the podcast for. Some people purely do this because they love doing it and talking to people, and just it's a hobby. Some people
Mm,
don't have any plans to do anything big with it. They just enjoy it. They have a topic that they love, and they just want to do a podcast. And maybe it'll be big. Maybe they'll be famous one day. But I'm not quitting my day job. I'm not trying to turn this into a corporation or anything like that. I'm just doing it because I love it, and something might happen one day, uh, and that's awesome. I totally respect that. I love when people do that, especially when they know that that's their goal, when they know that that is what they're trying to do with their podcast. Those people who think I want to turn this into a business don't just turn a podcast into business. Okay, now I'm just going to make money with it. It
mm,
doesn't just, you don't just turn on the money, right? You actually have to run a business. You have to turn on. You have to actually start a business if you want to run your podcast as a business. That's the product, right? That is your product there. But you actually have to have a corporation around it. You have to have a business around it. You have to have marketing. You have to have
mhm.
promotion. You have to have sales. You have to have consistency with your product. You have to have a good set. You have to have good audio, good video. You have to treat it like a business that people are going to want to show up to, whether you're whether you're doing it free or whether you try to do a subscription model. Regardless, if you're going to make money on this, with and probably most people make money with advertising. If you're going to make money with advertising on this, you need a lot of people to listen to it. you need people to tune into it, take it seriously, and see it as a actual professional, well done, thought out podcast that I'm going to come back to next week for your next episode. So you actually have to run it and treat it like an actual business.
Yeah, I guess I would kind of like what I started doing it because I'm a musician and I love it, and I thought I should give people the platform that Rock Tunes gave me. And then I started to realize that it had for me the effect of funneling people into my music or creating a community around what I believe is important is giving a light to emerging and independent artists, maybe people who are
Right.
not in the top 20 or even the top 100. But I've talked to musicians all over the world, from South Africa to Japan to Iceland, Latvia, anywhere. And I ended up getting a couple Grammy Award winning producers on. And it was
That's
just
awesome.
because what I do is like, because I believe in what I'm doing. Like I'm really much into indie emerging scene. And
Right.
that is not necessarily trying to make money. But what I was doing was like, I had a belief that I felt that was important. These are important voices. And then money started happening because I started getting people supporting me. It's not my main gig, but I'm actually, making money from it with that,
Right.
not the intention to do it. It
Sure.
just
And
started to happen.
agreed. And that's awesome. And a lot of people do that as well, right? It's not necessarily just the podcast is generating advertising where you're maybe reading the host read ads, the Howard Stern type of ads where you're reading and supporting, and this podcast, by the way, is sponsored by, Crest toothpaste, right? Like it's not always that. Sometimes it's used as a marketing channel, a marketing direction for your other business, right? So maybe that's music, right? Maybe you're using this to promote your music. Maybe you're using it to promote your law office. Maybe you're using it to promote your other consultancy for this other stuff that you do. And this is just a social media channel type of marketing for that. So there's definitely a lot of podcasts out there that have zero intention of running ads on there, and they just use it as sort of a top of funnel, like an Instagram or a Facebook or something like that, where they're just bringing people in and getting people to pay attention to their actual product that they're looking to sell or market.
Yeah, because that's kind of like the elevator pitch. Because like I've seen since 2016 when I started, I've seen a lot of sales people get into it, people
Right.
providing services, doing products, kind of like infomercial type of podcasting. And I
Yeah.
see a lot of sales guys into it. And it's like I never really looked at it that way. I looked at it as talking about people's art. And art is a product. And
Right.
if you're an independent musician, you're still selling your record, you're
Mhm.
selling that single, you're selling the tour, you're selling your merch.
Right.
But like I'm trying to get people to pay attention to other people's work rather than just my own. Um, so it's interesting, like the elevator pitch or the advertising kind of structure or the way to monetize art has always been kind of tricky because you don't know what people's tastes are. And I'm very eclectic, and if you've got that kind of eclectic thing, it's not like a known thing. It's hard for like the big guys to probably want to support that, you know.
Our podcast is similar in that respect as well. We run the Friday Night Karaoke podcast, and the Friday Night Karaoke podcast features artists from really all over the country, sometimes internationally as well, Canada or New Zealand, mostly English speaking countries because it's the songs we know, and people are singing karaoke songs all over the place, and it's not, we sometimes we see a lot of karaoke. You think of one thing, you think sort of drunk at a bar singing,
Izakaya.
Dead or
Yeah.
Alive, right? Like, or something, but we actually see tons of amazing, talented singers on our karaoke podcast, on our group, our Facebook group, Friday Night Karaoke, and the podcast. It's mind blowing, the talent of so many
So
of
has
these
it
artists
become
that are
like
out
an
there.
America's Got Talent type of thing? Has it like segged from being like a bar kind of izakaya, have fun to more like, oh, this is a showcase for unknown talent?
It has definitely become a showcase for unknown talent. It blows my mind the talent level of some of the singers that are on our podcast, on our Facebook group, but we don't treat it like uh, like an American Idols. We're not sitting there getting all Simon Cowell rude on people. It's all positive. We try to uplift people's spirits, uplift people's atmosphere and just bring people to their best singers. Some people join our group and then they won't sing for months. And then finally they're like, listen, I've been following this group for 3 months now, and I've never posted a song. I've never sang anything like this. And here I go. I feel comfortable now. I want to get out there and give it a shot. And they post their first song. And some of these people are amazing. Like the shower that they've been singing in for the past 30 years has been so lucky because but that's the only person that's heard them is nobody. Just they sing in their car, they sing at home, and no one else has heard them. And now they're out there singing in front of, we have a group of 15,000 people, and our podcast is the number 2 music podcast in America right now. So it gets tons of people listening to it. And we featured these amazing singers. It's really cool.
That's pretty cool. Because I think it's always interesting, because I like to push independent and emerging artists.
Right.
And when you talk to singer-songwriters, because I kind of do like a behind the music thing with singer-songwriters and like do their story. And you always, when you talk to a lot of artists, a lot of them don't know how to select their best songs. They usually have to have other people, because artists get really particular about their voice, about the song. And a lot of times the song they think is the one is not the one. Like when they talk to their production people, they're the song they're scared of. The song that's most personal usually is kind of like the singing in the shower. They're scared to show it.
Yeah.
And that's the one that usually is the one that it works. And that's what's hard when you're a songwriter, because you're putting your heart on your sleeve, you're putting it out there. It's hard to kind of do that. Some people are scared. They have the fear factor of letting, and it's cool that you're actually giving a platform for more people to kind of come out of that.
It is definitely the case with a lot of singers, especially on our group. Sometimes people would post a song and I'm like, oh, that was pretty good. It wasn't bad. And then they post a song in another type of genre or a different style of singing. And you're just like, holy, sugar honey iced tea. That was fantastic. Like that was great. Oh my God. How are you not famous? Like it is incredible. Sometimes when you hear people in there, they've never sang in front of anyone before, or they've been singing something else and they change it up a little bit and they're just amazing.
Yeah, that's where people, there's so much of a clone kind of process in the music industry, where, everybody goes to the top 20 producers and keeps on redoing the same samples and the same loops and the same clips. And being a musician, I'm a child of the 70s. So I'm a synthesist. So I have like Moogs and Rolands and hardware, Eurorack, and I sound from sound waves. I start with sound design, like Dr. Robert Moog's subtractive synthesis sound design, before I go into Buchla sound design, before I do anything. And when you see so many people today, they just clip something or they grab somebody else's work and they say, well, they're a writer. And it's just a bunch of clips they threw together on a DAW. And they didn't actually put any real work into it. But a vocalist, to me, what people don't understand is a vocalist is a musician. In your instrument is your voice. And the talent you have as an individual is uniquely you. And you might have been inspired by X person, Elvis or Marvin Gaye or whoever. But your individual voice is a unique instrument. And when people can hear that and hear you, I always try to like produce the best version of somebody's original like self, rather than trying to turn them into whoever's in the top 20. Because I think that's what's great about music is the individual character of the individual musician.
Sure. Yeah, auto-tune has helped a lot of singers in the past decade or so. We on our group, in addition to singing other people's songs, occasionally people write their own songs, or they'll redo a song in a completely different genre of music, turn one song into from pop to rock or to country or something like that, and just completely change it up. We had on our podcast just the other night, it's about to go live, I think today, our latest episode, this one singer, Katie, and she played a song and I'm like, man, this is fantastic. I've never heard this song before. And at the end of the song, my co-host surprised me. He's like, actually, she wrote that. She wrote that whole song, did all the music, laid it all down, did all the tracks and mixing. Like, that's hers. And I was floored.
That's
floored.
awesome. I'm
Yeah.
glad that you're actually giving singer-songwriters that type of platform because so many people what I've done with my podcast is because I am a big believer in the independent music. I was a college radio guy. Like I
Nice.
was one of the kids that was breaking REM, that was breaking, back in the day, like IRS records, Sub Pop, those
Mhm.
small labels. I was one of these kids, like I was at Bowdoin College, and I was breaking those bands back in like
Right.
86, 87,
Nice.
because that's what I felt. I is like everybody you can listen to regular radio, but I thought it was really cool to listen to these bands like the Replacements and the Who's Do's of the world
Mhm.
before they got big. That to me was like that's where you really know what a scene like a CBGB scene, like a
Right.
Whiskey a Go Go scene.
Yeah.
If you think back in the day, you had Blondie, you had the Ramones, you had Television, you had Patti Smith, all coming out of the same scene. And
Mhm.
then today you got a lot of people like this, like cloning so much. Like, would you have that much diversity in a scene?
It's it's a good question for sure. There's definitely a lot of I mean, there's definitely a lot of mixtures of music that we're seeing on our network, on our Facebook group, on our podcast. We change up the themes each week, so we're actually challenging people to step outside of their comfort zone. So this week could
Yes.
be 80s pop week, right? And you see all these singers that are like, I don't really do too much 80s pop, more of a country singer, or like, and they're like, all right, I'm gonna give it a try, and
Give it a
they
try.
start posting 80s pop. Or next week, like I think this week is actually uh, so what is it this week? Oh, UK week, right?
Okay.
UK,
Oh,
British
cool.
Invasion, right?
British
So
Invasion, like
yeah,
Yardbirds,
so
like
we're gonna get all
Yardbirds,
these, yeah, exactly. We're getting
Animals.
all these singers who are coming out and like, all right, I got to find some Beatles songs or some Stone songs and like things that they may have never sang before, just to post and to
Yeah.
to put a song up for the theme of the week, and it makes people really uh, like try something different, which is pretty cool.
I
So
think
I
that's
love
always
seeing that as
great.
well.
Like if you get somebody to try like do an Eric Burden and the Animals, go try to do
Mhm.
the Yardbirds.
Right.
Take one of the bands that wasn't as big, like a Moody Blues or something, and take a track that wasn't big, and
Yeah.
actually then that's cool. Like you can be in that kind of motif, but you could do something nobody ever heard and kind of make it your own. And I think that's kind of cool when people find like the deeper tracks, and that's why I've always been kind of I'm an album oriented guy. I grew
Mhm.
up with vinyl and 8 tracks,
Nice.
and I always feel like when you read a book, you don't just read the liner notes. The problem with playlists today is that the deeper tracks show you who an artist is. And
Right.
if you only listen to the single, you don't actually really know who that artist is. And so I try to encourage people to get deeper with when I do my
Mhm.
podcast because I'll go deep into somebody's project
Right.
and try to get people to like pay attention to that a whole picture that because I believe songwriters are storytellers. Singers like they have a whole motif that it's just like anything that if you put a little listening time into it, then
Mhm.
you'll be rewarded. And I think that's cool that you're bringing people out there actually now writing their own songs because that's core to you know, not just being retro and just running with the past, but kind of moving forward.
And I don't want to mislead. It's not everybody writing their own songs. It's mostly people singing other people's songs, which is still a huge challenge, and wildly talent oriented. We're seeing people that are so we started this in the pandemic. Okay, so everybody was home during 2020 when we kicked this off, 2021, and uh, all these professional singers that were kind of, out of work. They were on Broadway or they were in bands. They
Mhm.
were stuck at home. So all of a sudden, this influx of talent joined our group, people who are
Oh,
just
that's cool.
professional singers. So it was really interesting to see. All of a sudden, I'm like, all right, someone's singing karaoke, and you're like, holy shit, who is this person? Like, that's amazing. And uh, they were professional singers. Now, of course, everything opened up, but thank goodness, right? And uh, but those people are still members of our group and still jump in and post songs along with everyone else who's not a professional singer. So it's cool seeing that, and it's cool seeing the people who are not professional singers, like the professional singers, like liking or giving a good comment to those people who are just starting this up and just singing for the first time or just getting into singing. And the
Mhm.
encouragement level has been really just through the roof. Everybody who posts on our Friday Night Karaoke group gets likes and comments and feedback. And again, we keep it negativity free. This is people are not going in there to to rip other people's talents or anything like that. We don't allow that, and
So
and
you
it
don't have
almost
like
never happens. It almost never happens, which is great. It every now and then. I mean, we have 15,000 people, so you'd think there's got to be a lot of jerks in
you
there.
gotta be
15,000
some
people. It's surprisingly minimal. We almost kick out nobody because there's so few instances of people being like
haters.
an
Not
idiot.
good.
Yeah, this really not. It's almost never happens. Really, I think occasionally we kick people out because they're like, and maybe they'll get in there and they'll just post garbage or spam the group or something like
Oh
that.
yeah.
We don't want that. We don't want that either. But like we almost never kick anybody out for being a jerk or rude or anything like that. It's been surprisingly good.
So the modpod.com is like, can you explain what the name of your podcast, what it
Yeah,
means?
so that's actually our day job. It's mopod.com. And
Mhm.
we're the largest driver of growth to some of the biggest podcasts out there. So we're a
Okay, that's your main
podcast
job.
ad agency. That's
Okay.
our day business. It's how we pay the bills. Our podcast doesn't bring in any money either. Like we were talking about in the beginning there.
Mm,
Like we don't
yeah,
run it as a business with tons of ads in there, or we're not selling anything at the end. We do it for fun, just to
for
be
fun,
in
yeah.
the industry. Just we love being in this industry. We love the karaoke space. We love our group. We love singing. We love getting together with some of the singers and doing this and just having fun out in public with karaoke. But we don't run it as a business. It is sort of mm, our side project for our actual company. That's where we actually do the business.
That
So we work with some of the biggest podcasts out there. Like I mentioned, our logo page looks almost fake. It's so good. Like our clients are just fantastic. We have amazing clients that are some of the biggest podcasts that you've heard of, and we work with some small podcasts as well. We launched a self serve platform as well for smaller podcasts where uh, historically we couldn't work with some of the smaller podcasts because it just takes so much of our team's time to do a good job in promoting some of these big podcasts out there that we felt bad that we couldn't work with the
the
smaller
smaller, yeah.
podcasts, so we built a self-serve engine that lets a small podcast jump in there. You add your RSS feed, you type in a title and a description, you type, it pulls a lot of the stuff from the RSS feed, but you can go in there and edit it and upload some artwork, and it just automatically runs on our network without having us to do a lot of the heavy lifting. And
That's cool.
that's it. It is so cool. I mean, I've built a lot of software and products and been with a lot of teams over the years, and this is definitely the coolest thing we've ever built. It is. I'm so proud of it. It's not even funny. It's such a great product, and we get such amazing feedback. Podcasts love it. The small podcasts love it because they get to advertise alongside these bigger podcasts that are historically our clients. Our big podcast companies, our customers love us as well because we really focus on results. That is our biggest drivers. We want people to be happy. We want to handhold everything directly through the entire system, and we want to make sure that we are treated as like part of your team. We try to get involved and try to make sure that you are doing the right thing with your ad. We make suggestions. We'll help with the artwork. We try to make sure that this thing works really well, and we only get paid on performance. So people like that.
So you do I guess you're into guerrilla marketing and growing communities and branding. So maybe talk about like how do you get I guess is the use of many different marketing tools to get these podcasts because there's so many podcasts being generated every day. There's new podcasters coming
Yeah.
on the scene. It's kind of like Spotify with music, right? You get so many bands out there that it's kind of like, is there any really way to make money if there's just so much product flooding the market? So how do you
Right.
distinguish and make people like stand out?
Well, you have to have a good podcast to begin with. I'm not there to record people's podcasts and pick uh, the content. Right? There's a lot of podcasts like I mentioned right in the beginning of the show, 800 70. What was it? What number is this?
This is they're like if we go back and look like
All right, I'm not gonna make it. I'm not. It wasn't a quiz, but I mean, it was like 800 and like high 800s, right?
897.
897. Damn it, I should have waited like 3 more. Honestly, I should have been like just 900. That would have been pretty cool. But anyway, 897. Podcasts typically don't last that long. There's so many podcasts that are stuck at number 1 or number 2 or 3. Most podcasts don't get past, a double
12
digits
or something.
Yeah, like it's like there's like a high percentage, a high percentage of podcasts that never get into double digits, and for you to be doing it this long is fantastic, right? So there's promoting promoting a podcast that has been around for some time is great because you got a following, right? You've got people on social media, you got people who already love you. You know what your audience needs at this point. Hopefully, by 897, you know what your audience is looking for. So it's really cool working with podcasts that have been around for some time. But we also see podcasts that are brand new, that are just getting off the ground, that are still trying to find their footing, so to speak. So
Mhm.
sometimes it takes a little bit of a different approach where you have to build up that brand awareness of what that podcast is going to be about. Look, and sometimes it's got, maybe somebody that's a celebrity behind that, and that certainly helps,
Yeah.
But a lot of times it doesn't. A lot of times there's a podcast out there, and it's, nobody knows
Who they are. Yeah.
who this people are, and so it takes some time to get the word out and make sure that you're promoting it and putting it in the right light and getting it in front of the right audience. Often we will get people who say our audience is this sort of demographic, and then when we promote it, we're like, that's really not what we're seeing. We're seeing a slightly different demographic. Have you considered really, that this might be the people who are listening to your podcast? And they're like, oh, that's interesting. So that often happens a lot, and so it's kind of interesting to see where your podcast resonates, and even doing something like that is good
It's a good
for you.
thing.
Even if you find out you're wrong on exactly where you should be promoting it, that's great. That's great news, because now you can target the rest of your efforts on the people who are actually listening and paying attention moving forward. Save you some time and effort, and increase who's going to be listening to it by using that data and making the best of it.
Well, I think what happens is like, when I first started, I was only dealing with musicians. And then people said, well, how can you seg into other areas? So we
Right.
initially started talking to authors, and
Mhm.
then poets and painters and photographers, people who are still creators.
Right.
And then we made the jump to talking to like CEOs, CFOs. And then we started talking to therapists, psychotherapists,
Uh-huh.
doctors, companies that sell nutrition supplements. We started talking to people we thought were interesting. And the whole thing was always kind of trying to still weave the idea of music and
Right.
influencing, and still saying like, hey, the Beatles were the biggest influencers ever. They caused people to create bands. They caused people to get into entertainment, people to become movie stars, get into TV,
Yeah.
because music is part of like the soundtrack of your soul and your mind. And if you start to figure out how to thread the needle and connect music to all these different things, and that's been the whole kind of the idea of expansive, because I deal with this idea of like expansive sound. So that was my music,
Mhm.
multiple genres. I'm not stuck in one genre. So I said, why don't I do the podcast the same way? It's expansive. So that means I can tackle all kinds of things as long as I feel connected to it. And I feel I can
Right.
thread a needle. And so that's the way I approach it. And I found I had, audiences outside the US. I got, people not just within the United States, but all over the world. And then you're like, wow, because there's people just into what we do, and you're surprised. Where you see people listening, to be Argentina or Israel or South Africa. You're like, wow, that's interesting.
Isn't that kind of funny though, when you're like, oh, you look at your stats and you're like, man, somebody tuned in from, from Argentina, right? Like that's pretty cool. Like that's interesting. I love seeing that. I love looking at stats and seeing those things. And we look at our client stats, and that's awesome. But sometimes when you see it in your own stats, and you're like, man, people are tuning in from some places that are just I never would have thought, and that is always cool to see. And I like the one thing that you said was that you are tying everything back together to music, right? Because if you're interested in interviewing musicians and shaman and CEOs and and accountants and doctors and like all these different people. It's like, well, what's the one thing that you're bringing together? Like, how do you have sort of a cohesive podcast by interviewing all these different people? And you're tying it back to music. That is, I think, the tying factor that I think is why your podcast has been around for so long, right? That you stray away from the type of person that you're interviewing, but you're tying it all back together and bringing everybody back into this fold with the music genre. And I think that's pretty cool. That's a great idea.
Yeah, that was the way I was able to thread the needle, because I was like, hey, how can I use these tools? Because like,
Right.
I first started podcasting, there weren't a lot of tools. And then they started having these things, they're matching guests and pushing you out on platforms, doing automation, doing all these things that you never did before. And I was like, all right, I started taking advantage of each one. And then it started opening up my markets, in terms of like, who can I talk to? And when I first they started talking to actors, and it's like, well, they're not musicians, but they're still creatives.
Sure.
And then when you talk to them, a lot of actors actually are frustrated musicians. And then you talk to them and they want to talk about their music, which usually isn't doing so well, but they want to talk about it. And then you talk, an executive is like, well, they like the Beatles, they like the Stones, or they like the Clash. So
Sure.
you find a way to weave it into, like, how do you get into your creative zone? Why listen to music? What do you do? You meditate. You talk to
Right.
therapists. It's like, oh, art therapy and meditation, we use music. So then it all starts to connect and say, hey, I figured out how I can do it. And it becomes like a natural thing. So I always was big into, I tried to do recorded podcast, and it wasn't my thing. I'm more of a live guy. I like to do it live. That's just the way I do it. And you suffer sometimes in the quality not being what you could do if you don't do it that way. Right. But I like the authentic nature, kind of like if you play jazz. You're in a fusion band, are you going to sit there, stop it and start and stop and start, or you let it go? You learn how to recover. And that I just decided, well, doing it live would be my thing. That's just the idea.
Live is good. It's definitely a risk. I might drop an F-bomb any second now, and
Or maybe an explicit, so we don't go.
so I'm going to try. Do you have the explicit rating on
Yeah.
there? Or
Yeah, we use it
I'll
everywhere we distribute. We tell people we're explicit, because we just decided we're not going to have to play with that. So we just said, leave it open.
Okay, good. Because on our podcast, we tend to cuss a little too often. But
all good. It's all
yeah,
good.
so I've been trying to watch my mouth here, but now that I know, well, shit,
you don't got to worry about it.
So no, it's fun doing the live ones. We rarely do the live ones. Every now and then we do a contest or a competition. We have a mic drop competition where people would submit a song. So as I mentioned, we have like about 15,000 or so members in our group with the theme of the weeks that we do each week. But every now and then we do a mic drop competition where we're going to pick your best song. What we're going to do is we're going to do that sort of American Idol kind of little thing here. And we're going to do some semifinalists. We're going to get down to finalists. We're going to have some judges. And then we're going to pick some winners and give out some prizes. And the finalists we bring on to the live show. So we broadcast it on our Facebook group with all of our members able to watch. And of course, it's recorded so people can do the playback afterward. But the live one is definitely a lot of fun. But you never know, right? Like we try to.
You know what people got to do.
Yeah, on our regular ones, we drink and we curse a little bit, and occasionally we'll say something like, we should probably edit that out. Yeah, we should edit that one out. So we'll go back afterward and be like, all right, let's just edit out that one, because you know what, that may have been a little too far, So or sometimes it's just too stupid, like sometimes it's just not funny, So we're like, we're trying to joke here, and we're like, oh, maybe we dragged that joke out to death and it didn't land at all. Maybe let's try that again. Maybe let's just get rid of that last minute or so of us rambling, So but live, yeah, that's
but it's a strange thing. It's what I've been doing, like all these episodes. And I've talked to other podcasters that's like, wow, I can't really do it. I'd like they say, wow, I can't believe that you do yours live all the time. And I said, yeah, well, I tried it and I wasn't good And I didn't like the idea, like, it kinda limited me because then I have to spend all this time editing, and then I can't
Right.
interview as many people. And my whole thing was, sometimes I interview people, like, 5 or 6, days a week. And if I had to edit every episode, I couldn't do as many interviews.
Yeah, you'll
And
never
so
get through
I
it.
like the idea of stream of consciousness is like the way I like to play. I play
Right.
with a bunch of band guys. We don't get totally into trying to like to make the perfect track. We play and we track it, and maybe we go back and overdub. But I'm kind of a big believer in the old school way of recording, where you come in and you just let it be and see what you can do, and then refine it, because in that style you find a lot of magic. If you because a
Right.
lot of in my mind, when you're a musician, if you make logic take over too much, you lose a lot of the inherent ability. Like, you got to trust yourself as a musician, right? And the same thing, like when I'm podcasting, I kind of take it the same way. I'm going to trust my instincts to do it in a natural way, so it seems authentic. And that's why people find, is like, wow, I like having an authentic type of style, because then I don't have to feel like I'm going through my questions and I didn't do it right, and I got to replay that, recut it, and redo this. I'm like, nah, I'm not really into that.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, it's definitely a different approach. Definitely a different approach.
So in your business, so if people go to mowpod.com, like you said, there's a self-service for the people who are maybe smaller, not the big clients. So, like, probably a lot of my audience are independent musicians, and they're trying to push their work, and they're trying to, get people to go to their websites, buy their merch and stuff. And some of them are starting to do podcasts with their bands and doing live shows, like behind the band, watch
Right.
them record their album. Do you have a certain, like, a path for those type of people who are creatives trying to push their music or push their art?
So it's not necessarily specifically geared toward artists, musicians, or anyone to push their art, but people use it for just about anything, especially on the small self-serve side. So we have some that are that talk about Star Trek or relationships or business or news or anything they want to talk about. So the genre list is almost endless.
Mhm.
Marketing experts and all sorts of different really cool podcasts. So it's cool seeing the smaller independent ones get out there, and they're starting to use it as a business, right? Or whether that's I want to eventually run some advertisements on there and I need more people listening, or I want to use this as a top of funnel approach where I want people to then go to my website and see what we're all about.
Yeah, can we get a lot of, life coaches and mentors doing like master classes or doing like retreats. And they kind of, what I've seen them do is they have podcasts that kind of funnel their clients to their services, to their retreats, to their, one-on-one or their master classes or their books. And so do you have like something for people who are doing that, like selling their master class, selling their services? Is there a type of process for those type of people?
Yeah, I mean, it's really the same thing. It's the podcast is the initial product, is the gateway, is the top of funnel. So whether you are trying to get more people to listen or you're trying to get people to attend your masterclass, right? So during the podcast, you talk about, oh, by the way, we're going to be in blah 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 on the 3rd and the 4th of June. You should check it out, right? Or check out our website. So it depends on what they want to advertise, how they want to get people to get in the door after the podcast.
Hmm. So yeah, that's the type of thing that a lot of people are starting to realize. Like, even musicians are starting to realize, well, I could do a master class on production or on guitar playing, or be like a vocal coach type of class, or how to use a DAW, how to use Pro Tools in the best way. I mean, we used it
Right.
on this record. And so a lot of musicians like, well, that's actually valuable for somebody to show me how to use FL Studio, and they're actually a musician, not some this guy doing it, that they actually used it on their record. So other musicians like, wow, they actually, I can go and reference a real piece of work that was
Mhm.
using that tool. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, there's
Or
ways.
yeah,
Yeah.
I see people like here's how to play, here's the chords for my song, right? Or here's how I play this, or here's how I'm using this.
Mm.
So there's definitely ways to use it as social media to get the word out about your band or what you're doing. Obviously, everybody's on Instagram or Facebook, and you see the clips of videos, and people are singing part of a song, and there's different singers doing different songs, and they're backstage and everything like that. But there's also people who are doing the podcasts to get the word out about what they're doing, both on the road or just as a side business. There's definitely a lot of ways to use this to your advantage. So it's cool seeing different artists use podcasting in creative ways that other people may or may not be using this.
Yeah, it's a good way to, I found I started getting work to do like video game soundtracks, create music for art therapists. Just because I talked to art therapists and I talked to a
Right.
video game guy. It's like, oh yeah, maybe you should go and do the soundtrack for my work. And I started working on it. And I've actually, been able to work on records as
Right.
like, because people find out, oh, you're a musician, then people contact you on the side and say, let's work on a project. I had a guy today I was talking to, and then we were going to work on a project. And so those things are kind of like you didn't even see it coming. But because you show up, that's what I started to find. Like, because you show up and you're consistent, then
Mm-hmm.
you start getting opportunities you didn't even actually pitch for it. It just starts to happen.
Agreed. It is always cool doing these things and promoting yourself and putting yourself out there. And the work that you're getting out of it is usually not something that you expect. I've met a lot of people doing our podcast and or doing other people's podcasts, or just being in business for the past 20 years. And I've made investments into really cool companies that I never would have thought I would be an investor in. And it's just being out there and putting yourself out there and just getting gigs, getting work, getting just meeting different people is incredibly important for your own brand, for your business, for everything that you're doing.
Yeah, then you can actually you can create your own community, but you also can get yourself into communities that you didn't think you would actually fit.
For
Like
sure.
you build a community of a bunch of like-minded producers. And then you find out that the game or independent game companies want you to write stuff for them. And I
Yeah.
wasn't even thinking about them. And then they start coming. And then,
Right.
art therapists to say, oh, I do art therapy. I do music therapy. I want you to do like some kind of ethereal Enya like type of thing. But I don't want to have to pay Enya. I want you to write something for me. so, you know, so, so you start getting opportunities and you're like, you didn't even see it coming and you never expected, to be working with therapists or shamans and people like that. And they actually want something. And, yeah, just this because the podcast becomes like a marketing kind of teaser where you
A
show
hundred
you
percent.
there. Yeah, and
A
then you're
hundred
like,
percent. When you check somebody out that you want to do business with, and you look at their social media accounts and you see nothing there, it's less inspiring. It's less. You don't see much. You don't know how to gauge it nowadays, right? Where you're like, all right, I want to do business with this company or person or group or something, and there's nothing online about them, right? Like, where I don't know, but if you are putting yourself out there for work, for anything, and you've got a decent social media presence. I mean, look, I'm not saying, you need millions of followers and you need, all the professional stuff, but if you're doing this as a business and you make it look good and people are then coming to your site and then they're clicking on your social media buttons and they're seeing that, you're out there and you're in the industry and you're doing nice stuff, it is wildly helpful, wildly helpful. And
it's like
this,
free, like a free ad. It's a free. It's like
it,
you wouldn't
it
even spend.
totally is.
Yeah, it's almost like almost every podcast I've had, I end up getting like, I start getting these opportunities, and it's almost like I was trying to do an infomercial, but I wasn't. It
Right.
doesn't come off as fake. And a lot of times I'll get it's like that introduction. Like my dad was a sales guy and
Mhm.
he could talk your ear off. He was like an insurance guy. And
Right.
that he would just talk his way into a house and then sell all these policies. And
Right.
he would be talking about sports, or talking about this stuff. And what happens is like a podcast, when you talk to a shaman or you talk to a therapist or you talk to a life coach, and then you weave music into it, then suddenly they say, oh, yeah, maybe we could talk about music on a side discussion, or maybe how we could use it. And then suddenly it's an opportunity. And it's like you had that whole hour podcast. It wasn't supposed to be a sales call. but it becomes like a sales funnel
Right.
without trying to be a sales funnel,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, having personality helps, right? Like you want to be able to be good at what you're doing and be personable and being friendly. And, if you're really great at something, but nobody knows it because you can't convey that and you can't speak to people about it. And, you're not going to get as many gigs as if you are able to explain what you do in a simple way that everyone can understand it and a way that relates to people, and then speak about it intelligently and convincingly, where people say, all right, that's pretty interesting. I need to learn more about what this guy's doing. How do I learn more? So you mentioned earlier elevator pitch, and I spent the last 20 odd years in the entrepreneur and venture capital space working with startups. And I've spent so many times listening to elevator pitches where the person would talk and you could tell that they were passionate about their business, but they couldn't convey the message, right? They just overcomplicated it or just talked about the wrong things that people just didn't care about. And they would never get the kind of results that they were looking for, and then you meet a person and he or she would be like, here's exactly what I'm doing. Here's why it's important. Here's why it's interesting. Here's why I think you'll find it interesting. Here's why I love it and I'm passionate about it. And let's figure something out. And hands would go up. That person would get tons of people walking up. Yeah, tons of people walking up after the pitch and be like, "Hey, how you doing? Here's my card. We should chat." Because those people knew how to convey the message well. And I spent a ton of time working with entrepreneurs and just telling people, listen, you got to hone it down. You got to give a message that people will understand, make it easy to understand, give the important parts. Everybody's going to walk away from what you're doing, what your pitch is, and remember like 3 or 4 things, maybe. So you try to squeeze in. Hey, what do you do? And all right, I'm going to tell you everything that I do. Everything. Get ready to listen because I have a ton of shit I'm going to tell you. And nobody's going to remember what you're saying, right? Nobody's going to. Oh man, I remember and they're going to remember 3 things. They're going to remember the 3 wrong things, right? The 3 things that. Yeah, I don't. Oh, wait. To the point. Yeah, exactly. Oh, wait, that's what you walked away with? Those points? Yeah. Well, I said 30 other things. That's what you walked away with? Well, you said 30 things, man. Say 3 things next time that you want me to remember, and I'll remember those 3 things. And then,
it's like the top 3, top 5. Like, I do a job in IT. I'm a software designer.
Right.
So a lot of times we're in Scrum sessions and everything, and we just got to break it down to executives, and we bring it down to the top 5, top 10.
Right.
We try to be real clear because, I work with a bunch of programmers. I'm a BSA. I'm a business system analyst. Okay. My job is to make sure the programmer make the CEO fall asleep, and actually tell them what really is going on. We're like, okay, so this is the top 5 things. These are the critical path things. I can communicate, right? So that's why we exist, because we communicate and the programmer knows how to code. The problem, I think, with entrepreneurs, they're kind of like the coder. Like you create it, but you don't really know how to communicate. You guys need a sales guy. You need like a marketing guy. You need like an A&R guy. Like a lot of musicians, they can't do A&R. Like you try to put them in, like they're not going to see it because they're a musician, right? They don't know how to do it. That's not their job, So if you're going to try to transform, you got to like learn how to do that elevator pitch and be like to the point. Top 3, top 5. Don't do top 100 because nobody's going to remember it.
Agreed.
Maybe the last thing you said.
Agreed. The best entrepreneurs out there are the ones that can communicate the idea the best, and that's the best pitch people for anything. If you're pitching something, it's the people who can communicate that the best in the simplest method, so the most people can understand what they're saying. And
Steve Jobs used to be able to do.
Exactly. Can be convincing.
Yeah, be convincing. He can do it. Maybe he was like one of those techies, but he had the ability to be a sales guy. Right. He knew how to present and get people interested and have the theatrics and be able to present in a way to make you want to buy that. You didn't even know you wanted it.
Exactly. But I walked out there and I spent the money. Yeah.
Yeah,
I used to meet such smart people, smart people, like incredible geniuses. And they'd get up there and they'd speak, and like, everyone's eyes would glaze over, and you'd be like, wow, you're freaking smart. But I have no idea what you just said or what you do or what I'm supposed to do next. Right. But thank you for your time. Like yeah, it was incredible listening to you use all those big words all tied together because you really sound like you know what you're talking about. So those types of people never really got the results or will get the results. They have to be able to convince, to bring it down to a level that everyone can understand what they're talking about. Because you're an expert in your industry, right? But not everyone's an expert in your industry, no matter what your industry is, right? Like, so you always have to make sure that you're explaining it to people where they can all understand, especially if you're in a room and you're trying to convince a massive amount of people. Make sure make sure people can understand what you're talking about.
Wait, does the Colgate CEO go in front of the audience, or does he do the soap commercial with Madison Avenue, and he gets a pitch man to sell the detergent? Because if he tried to sell it, he could be with a bunch of actuaries, and they're going to tell you all the reasons why they should, and it's going to bore you to death. It's like
Exactly. I'll never brush my teeth again if he was out there selling that, right? Like,
yeah,
ever, right? You want to have people who can pitch this and explain to you why they need to do this. So it's not necessarily the person with the formula, that sits there and is sitting there in the lab coat that's pitching this.
yeah, it's like
You hire the pitch man, right? You hire the people who can get out there and pitch this. So there's definitely the right people who should be on stage, whether you're doing a podcast, whether you're doing any sort of live show or any sort of business. You want to make sure that you're getting the point across and making an interesting product. Whether the product is interesting or not, like, you make sure that you sell it as interesting. Make sure that people will want to hear about it. Whether if it's a podcast, I want to learn. I want to know how you're going to listen to this episode and then listen to the next episode. Right?
Yeah.
Why am I coming back next week? Right? So make it interesting, make it entertaining, make it fun, make it relatable, and don't make it so deep and horrible that it's so, unless you are catering towards just that specific niche of the geeks of that industry that know everything about that industry, right? That are just in it all day and know the technical. Yeah, if you're doing a master class, great. Then get as deep as you want. But if you're looking to get widespread acceptance onto your podcast and get a lot of people listening to you, you have to be a little more general and talk it where everyone can understand it and relate.
When I started, I actually interviewed this guy that was actually using a service that would help you create like clips. Go and create your TikTok clip, your reel clip, your YouTube short clip, and then drive by finding like the nugget in your podcast.
Yeah,
that was the thing that people need to know, right? And then bringing that down to a 30-second clip, 60-second clip, 90-second clip, and sending it to the right platform.
Right.
And, and I actually was doing something like that with Reels and TikTok, and I drive stuff, and I go and I do kind of my own analysis. But it's like, somebody who's better at it would probably do a better job than me. I do okay, and I know I could do better. And somebody who does that for a living, they're probably going to do better. So you can't, like, when you're own your own business, sometimes you want to do everything, and sometimes you can't do everything because like you got to, it's like, well, who actually is going to be better at doing the SEO? Like, you could try to do it, but are you an SEO expert? Like, who could do A&R? Who is the booking agent? Is a real booking agent? They're the ones going to get you the show. Try to do it yourself, you probably won't get the show.
Agreed. Like Cap Show, I think is might be the software that you're referring to. It's great. And there's other things out there that, like you said, booking agents. So Podmatch, another great software. So if you're running a podcast, check out those two services. They're fantastic. And there's lots of really good services out there that will work with your social media and work with your editing, and there's all sorts of really good ones out there where you should not be doing all the stuff yourself, especially if you have like you're doing your stuff live, which is fantastic. But like if you have editing, right, and you're doing a lot of editing, post production and stuff, there's post production houses that will edit down your audio, that will balance out the levels so it sounds good, right? And they'll cut out all the ums and the uhs and the
Yeah.
they'll cut that whole thing out, right? So there's definitely production houses that will do a lot of this stuff and make your life easier, especially if you're going to start running this as a business, even if whether it's top of funnel business, whether it's I want ads, whatever it is. There's definitely amazing softwares out there that will make your life easy, especially now, like this
With the AI, with the
yeah,
AI.
the AI softwares, man. That's like, oh yeah, well, you just talk and we'll make the audio sound good, and we'll just run it through like this Adobe filter, and it's not you could dial in from a telephone, in the middle of
It's
the
still
desert,
sounded.
and then it'll still sound amazing, right? Or we'll edit out and find all the funny things, and we'll adjust the sizes so it can go on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, or like it'll just work,
Or do
So
random movement of your static visuals, like actually move
yeah,
into different spaces to make it more interesting, or do zoom ins, do
yeah.
different camera angles. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
we're
a lot
using
of
we're
cool
using
stuff.
Stream we're using StreamYard right now. Great software. We use StreamYard for our podcast as well.
Yeah.
It's fantastic, like, and it gives you this finished product. You don't need a technical director necessarily to sit there and swap out things. You can do it yourself. While you're doing this, you could put up the text at the bottom, the Chiron all over the place, right? So you can get all this stuff done. There's really great tools out there where you don't have to be a computer expert to use them. So definitely, like, if you have podcasters or aspiring podcasters listening to this podcast, don't let the technical hurdle be the hurdle that keeps you from doing it, because there's lots of really cool packages out there that will make your life a ton easier.
Yeah, I mean, I started as an audio only guy, and then
Mm.
I said, well, I got all this equipment because I'm a musician, so let me repurpose it and use it
Yeah,
to do the video. And then I
yeah,
said, well, yeah, I can actually use all my mixers and stuff and my mics to actually,
that's perfect.
level it up. And then, that's the way a lot of times, like, all the musicians like, yeah, I got a bunch of gear. I got really good cameras. I do make videos. I got mixers. I got computers for my DAWs. Like, you can do it. You got the stuff already. You just got to figure
Mhm.
out what to do. And
Right.
yeah, it's just finding the right expert, like when you want to level up. Like then you want to talk to, go to MOWPOD.com and
Mhm.
actually check out, like, because everybody has a goal. Like I hit like
Sure.
40,000 listeners, watchers this year,
Mhm.
just last month.
That's awesome.
And we're like, well, we want to hit like 100,000.
Yeah,
And
now
so
you have
yeah,
another goal, right?
yeah, so then we have no go. So could we hit the 40? It's like, well, now let's hit 100. Like not just
Nice.
hit 50, just hit 100. So yeah, to get there, we know there's some things we probably got to change, because
Sure.
we're level at this. To level up, then you got to do more. And so that's when you start to realize, okay, I need to engage other things, other services, and talk to other people like yourself.
Mhm. Yeah, and sometimes people come to us and they're not ready to use us. We've uh, we've turned away more sales than we've probably taken, because people would come to us and they're like, all right, here's what I want to do, and they don't have an actual plan yet, and we don't want them to spend money with us if they don't have an actual plan in place. So if you're doing this as a
Mhm.
hobby, sometimes people are just like, oh yeah, but it's a hobby. I have no real plans right now. I just know that I need to get the word out. And I'm like, yeah, all right, slow down. Let's think about what your next steps are. What before you start spending money on advertising, you need an actual product. You need to have an idea about what your plan is, right? So we love talking shop. So more often than not, we'll be on the phone with people, and we'll just be chatting it up for a while. And they're not even customers, and they're not going to be customers for quite some time. But we just talk about it, and we try to give advice and steer people in the right direction, because we try to one, we love
Well,
this
that's
industry,
useful.
right?
It's
But
good to
it is
know like where
it
you are.
is
Yeah,
yeah, it is, and
yeah,
it helps people, because I feel like sometimes maybe I just saved them from jumping in too fast to the pool. Sometimes you gotta take small steps into the pool, and figure out
yeah.
what's going on.
You definitely, like, when you get into this whole thing with music, it's like you have to decide, what are you trying to do? Like,
Right.
are you just trying to be able to get into sync licensing? Or are you
Mhm.
trying to just do your work with you like playing like the oldies at the pizza
Sure.
shop, or
Sure.
do you want to do more than that? And you want to engage in different things. And so like building that community is really important. Like over time, we've actually done like what we call bedroom producer festivals, where we go like
Right.
3 days and have the people who are on the podcast actually do behind the music live 30-minute sets for like a
Nice.
weekend. And we do it a weekend. We did it back last year and the year before. We could try to do it this year, but we've been doing so many podcasts, we haven't done it. But we're trying to, we have a big list of people we've dealt with
Mhm.
before. We had 30 different music acts actually do each one of these.
That's really
And
cool.
so and that's the idea of the community. It's like there's like kind of
Right.
what you're doing like with your karaoke
Yeah,
is
the
like
Friday night
bringing people
karaoke. Mhm.
together. That's a cool thing because then people are gonna find each other. You never know. You probably get like people getting record deals from what you did. What you do because
I,
people find
we'll
you
see.
and you never
Not
know.
quite yet. Sony hasn't called us just yet to sign anybody, but
Well,
we
it's
are
probably on
seeing.
the corner. They're on
Yeah,
the corner.
exactly. I did say yet, right? So, but we do see plenty of people that are up and coming. Some people auditioned for American Idol after being on our stuff for a while, and some people just made friends and do just sing collaboratively with other people that they've met on the group. So it's a really cool group.
We got them out of the shower. That's the first
Yeah,
step. If you get them out of the
exactly,
shower and you get them to
exactly.
actually show up, then they might show up at the bar. They might show up at the pizza shop. They might go get a cover band. They might start getting into it,
Yeah.
and that's how you
We've
get
had a
out
few
there.
people. We've had quite a few people start bands that, hey, listen, I'm thinking about starting a band, and they would post a bunch of songs, and eventually, all of a sudden, we'd be like, hey, look at that, that dude started a band. Like that's freaking awesome. This guy Ronnie started a band. Jacob started a
That's
band.
awesome.
It's so
Always
cool
good.
seeing that. Yeah, it is. Obviously, I fully expect one of your songs to be on Friday Night Karaoke in short order. I'm hoping.
Well, maybe I'll try
All right.
that.
Yeah. See that? One new user at a time. That's how I do this. So perfect. Now, definitely give it a shot. I'd love to see you on there. I'd love to see one of your songs and give it a
Yeah,
shout
yeah,
out, of
we can
course.
try it. Can we do our stuff is very experimental, but let's see what people do.
Throw it up there. Let's see what happens.
We throw it out there and see what happens because we got a lot of stuff. We're crazy. We got a lot of music, but
Nice.
yeah, thank you for being on the show. We actually hit the hour part mark. We went over, but that's the way it goes. That's why we like doing this because it's a natural conversation. We want
Yeah.
people to check out your website, mowpod.com. That will be clickable when it's fully out there. We were on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. Those permanent links will be there, and we're going to create a landing page so people, however they like to watch or listen to podcasts, we'll give that to you so your audience can
Perfect.
find this episode however they
Yeah.
want to see it
We'll spread the
or
word.
consume. Yep. So thank you very much for being on the Family Electric Ghost podcast. We want people to check out your karaoke
Yeah.
show.
Matter of fact, give it one last shout out there. So one, thank you so much for having me. Check out Friday Night Karaoke on Facebook. Just type in Friday Night Karaoke. You can join the group right there. It's also the Friday Night Karaoke podcast on anywhere you listen to podcasts. And of course, if you're in the podcasting space and want to check us out at mowpod.com, mowpod.com. And thank you so much for having me as your guest today. I really appreciate being on here.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
You too.